I decided I wanted to get paid to travel the world. ELX is really the community I wish existed when I was at SAP. To be a member of ELX, someone needs to be the head of events or a regional head of events, so in a lead position. They need to work for a company that has more than 500 million of annual revenue. Our value proposition is bringing together these people who are very lonely in their roles. These leaders just need somewhere to go to brainstorm, to collaborate, to commiserate in some cases, and that's what we provide for them. I have literally avoided doing an outdoor event my entire career since.
Wow. All right. Welcome, Nicola. Very excited to have you here today with Event Planner Confessions.
Thank you for having me.
Nicola is the CEO of ELX, and ELX has gotten quite a buzz around the industry lately, which I'm really excited to sort of uncover and demystify it a little bit for our audience today. But let's start with a little bit about you. Tell us how you got to become the CEO of ELX and what your journey has been so far.
Sure. It's been crazy long winding path. You know, I've never been one of those people that have a career direction, like a plan. You know, they always told you needed a 3-year plan. Not me. When I was 8, actually, probably I would have been younger. I was in high school. I decided I wanted to get paid to travel the world. And I wanted to be the person, like I'm really dating myself here, but that wrote the travel brochures, you know, like when you had a package tour holiday. I thought in my maybe I was 16 at the time, brain that I would be able to go and check out those places. So that was my career goal. So I studied hospitality and tourism at university in Toronto. And I fell in love with incentive travel in my 3rd year. It was a course they offered specifically on incentive travel. And it was before I knew I was analytical in any way. And it was like, wow, travel can impact business and I get to go to fun places. That's exactly what I want to do with my career. So did everybody else. It's obviously one of the hardest industries to get into. So after I graduated, I worked at a DMC. I worked at a hotel, and then I went agency side. So I spent 12 years of my career with Marriott's, and then I went to CWT for 2 years, and then I went freelance. I started consulting, which was kind of interesting. SAP was my main client for a lot of my consulting time the first time around. And as a non-Spanish and Portuguese speaking Canadian living in Toronto, it made no sense, but I did all of their Latin American event marketing strategy for years, like just random.
Sure.
And then from there, I landed up joining SAP. Through Ariba. Ariba was a separate standalone division. We had our own marketing team. I reported to the CMO on her leadership team. And then actually on my year anniversary, I had my one-on-one with her. I went to the airport, flew to Japan. By the time I landed in Japan, she'd been promoted to the CMO of SAP Global. It was like my world changed while I was in flight. And shortly thereafter, she asked me to come over to the global marketing team to lead event strategy, which in total I was with SAP for 5.5 years.
Okay.
And then, you know, through COVID was hard for everybody, especially of us in the industry. If we wanted to be digital marketers, we would have been digital marketers.
Right.
And so I got to the point that it just wasn't the right environment. And we started coming back to live events. But, you know, by 21, I knew it was time for me to go. So I left SAP actually in January of 2022. And started consulting again. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't care if somebody puts my strategy in a drawer. I don't have to watch it die. But it turned out I really cared. I missed being part of a team and I missed making a difference. I interviewed for a couple of roles, but I wasn't actively looking for a job. But Mark Brewster, who's one of the co-founders of ELX, he found me on LinkedIn through my content. And because I write about measurement a lot, I really am very passionate about that. I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit.
We will.
And he's like, you write like I think. I would love to meet you. And I was like, oh, there's an event measurement survey platform? I had no idea. And I'm like, I'm totally into this. How did I not know?
Yes.
So we had a call, which I thought was going to be a demo. Scheduled 30 minutes, went for an hour, still didn't have a demo. So next, we scheduled another call. Once again, no demo. Third call, he offered me the job, which I didn't know I was interviewing for.
And didn't even know it existed, right?
Exactly. Well, I did know ELX existed because I had tried to join.
Oh, okay. When you were with SAP or when you were consulting?
When I was consulting.
Okay.
So I left SAP in January of 2022. ELX started in September of 2021. So it wasn't on my radar when I was at SAP.
Just
it was just brand new. But I tried to join as a consultant, and he was like, "No, actually, it wasn't even him. It was whoever was running it at the time. Said, no, you can't join." So I did know ELX, but I didn't And I knew he was the co-founder of ELX, but I just didn't think I was interviewing for the job.
Yeah.
So the good thing is he got the real Nicola, the unfiltered Nicola, like he knew what he was getting, right?
Great.
Right from the beginning.
Well,
And,
that's important.
yeah, and it's been an incredible journey. So I joined in April of 24.
Wow. So a lot's happened since April of 24. You've grown the community quite a bit. Tell us, what is ELX? What's the real kind of thought leadership behind ELX? Because I know, a lot of people see on LinkedIn or different places posts about people joining and the community that exists. Maybe they've read a white paper or two, but what's the kind of overall premise, and what are people, what might they not know about ELX that you'd have to be a member to learn about?
ELX is really the community I wish existed when I was at SAP. I had some grassroots networks of friends that I could turn to when I needed support or to bounce ideas off of, but nothing formalized. And we all had massive jobs, and just even the lift to get meetings, our calls scheduled, was always a responsibility for somebody. So they always would just sort of naturally fizzle out and die. To be a member of ELX, someone needs to be the head of events or a regional head of events. So in a lead position, they need to work for a company that has more than 500 million of annual revenue annually. And they need to have at least $15 million of spend, or 350 events if they're doing small meeting portfolio. And the reason for that is so that we're putting people with like scope. It's not about just collecting big logos or big companies. Our value proposition is bringing together these people who are very lonely in their roles, because everybody thinks they get events in an organization because, hey, they planned a wedding or a bar mitzvah. So how difficult can it be? Or they've been to the event. And so these leaders, their roles are really lonely, and somewhere they just need somewhere to go to brainstorm, to collaborate, to commiserate in some cases. And that's what we provide for them.
And a lot of them do report to different people, right?
Yes.
A lot of organizations are set up with such different structures that they all have different reporting lines for events. Sometimes it falls in marketing, communications, business strategy, all kinds of different places. And I think with that, there can be some confusion of how do I even sit at the table, in the right table, and make sure that the events team is heard. And, you feel a pressure as the lead of your team to make sure everyone at the table, at your table, is, advocated for at the next table over.
Absolutely.
So it's really interesting, the whole thought of, lonely at the top and all of that. It exists, but it doesn't have to when you find organizations like this that bring people together. So.
And we operate under Chatham House rule, which I didn't even know what that meant when I first joined ELX. But basically it says you can use the information that you hear, but you can never say who said it, what company they work for, or who was part of the conversation. So that creates a trust and a transparency within these people that, might normally feel like they have to be really guarded. They can be very vulnerable. They can be very open with their peers because they know it's not going to be attributed to them, and it's a safe space.
Which I think is also really important because our industry is full of gabbers, right?
Yes.
And we like to connect people and we like to have like-minded conversations. But, as soon as you open up your mouth, then you don't know, necessarily where that's going to end up.
Exactly. And you don't own the story anymore.
You don't own the story anymore. Absolutely. And I think, too, even, on the DMC side, we're really excited to be new members of ELX and the only DMC aligned to the organization.
And we're extremely excited, too, to have you.
Yeah, it's a really big deal to us at Cohera. But I think part of what got us so excited is that opportunity to really get real information and really to be able to take that information for me personally and use it in ways to better our organization and really get that raw information, right? Not the kind of stuff that's fluffy and loose and here we go. I want to dive into the deep stuff and be around people that are willing to share that.
Yeah, to make the industry better. And that's a common thread that I see throughout our members. So we have 291 members now, 85% North American, 15% in Europe, and then across all industries. So that's one of the things that makes us really unique is we're cross-industry and cross-persona, because saying you work in events is like saying you're a doctor. It doesn't really mean much until you ask what kind, right? And there's a lot of, that I find our tech members, there's a lot of similarities in their structures and their roles. But when you compare that to financial services or insurance or legal, completely different worlds. And so that's really important for us as well. But to your point, our members and our partners, because we have a very different model than that, we're not an industry association, so we don't have sponsors. We have partners. We have 14 strategic partners, all of you hand-selected.
Right.
With more than 100 companies apply this year for partnership.
Wow.
Because we want to put partners that can deliver value to our members and also partners that can take value from our members as well together.
A reciprocal relationship is so important. So, something that you said recently was, the idea of the events business versus the business of events. And I think that that's a really interesting conversation that's happening at the table in ELX, right? Is what's the difference between the events business and the business of events? And what does that distinction, why does that matter?
Yeah, something I'm really passionate about, and I started back when I was at school in that incentive travel course. Events are business strategies, right? They're a channel, but that's designed to deliver an outcome. Every single event should drive some sort of an outcome or a business results. The events business, and we've all talked about how do I get a seat at the table? How do I get a C-level title? Whatever. You don't by talking about logistics and registrations and food and beverage and those types of things. You translate what we do, which is incredibly powerful, into business language and business results. And once you understand the difference, it changes the narrative for the channel, the function of events, but also for the people that use that language as well.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point before, data is king, right? And how do we use data to our benefit? But also, how do we even figure out what data we need to put it in front of the right people to drive the results that we want. I was having a conversation with Mark recently because I find his business very interesting, and we're doing some different partnerships and stuff in the future. And something we were talking about is we have these customers that are planning user conferences, for example, and they're making that tough decision: should I go off property for my one big night, or should I stay on property? And a lot of it is very sponsorship driven, and a lot of it is very data driven, but they don't have quite the right data on things like that. So one of the conversations we had was, let us try the offsite. Let us try it and let us build all the data we need to around it so that when we think about did it work or not, we actually can prove it back to your stakeholders of why not only did it work, but it had all these additional outcomes that you were hoping to get that you couldn't get by staying on property at the convention center in this example.
That's great. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah. So we had this conversation and I brought it to that customer and I said, hey, we've worked together for, 8 or 9 years. We keep having the same dialogue around should we go off site or not? And we keep landing on no. If you, take a leap of faith with us, go off site with us one night. We've already know which venue you like. It's the same city you've been at last year. We already planned the whole thing for you. Let us try, and we'll, as Cohera, bring you the value out of this data analytics on the whole experience. And then, we'll do it as a concession in our partnership. And then afterwards, let's talk about what worked and what didn't, and actually make a difference in your next program moving forward, right? So those are the types of conversations that I feel like ELX is bringing to the table for both partners and for planners along the way. But the data piece to it, for me, is so interesting. We're proud to partner with Evergreen, formerly known as Fenway Park Events, this season. Evergreen is reimagining what events can be, blending history, hospitality, and bold creativity to create experiences that leave a lasting mark on people and communities alike. Learn more at evergreenfenway.com. Tell me a little bit about some of the data that you're working on right now with the ELX. What are the hot topics? You've put out some white papers in the past, but what's on the horizon and what are you passionate about talking about?
There's a famous quote, and I can never remember the person that says it. I should really learn it and memorize it. But without data, you're just another person with an opinion, and I believe that very strongly. Okay. I wouldn't have my career that I have today if I hadn't been analytical and data-driven. It has been my differentiator. So when members become, there's a whole process. There's an interview process and so forth for people to become a member. I interview personally every single person that comes into the community. When they onboard, one of the questions we ask them is, which of these topics are the most interesting to you? Measurement, I think 89% said measurement.
See?
Right? So, but measurement means...
But how do we get there, right?
Exactly. A measurement means something different depending on where you sit. So if you're an event or experiential marketer, loosely defined, those people own their own budgets. what data and measurement looks like for them is something that's very different to somebody that sits in a centralized event services function that operates somewhat like an internal agency for the different business units throughout the company. So that was a big learning for me because I come from I'm an event marketer. So I like just there's still learnings for me around data in our industry because it's different. So we do ask that, and we run a member survey every year because of course we need our data and we need to hear from our members firsthand. So this year, the white paper you mentioned was the first year that we've ever released a white paper. We did a research study with Explory. We looked into what it would take to be future-ready leader. And we identified 5 themes that we were seeing in the industry out of the results. And one was there's not a lot of promotions. There's not a lot of turnover, which doesn't bring a lot of fresh new thinking.
It doesn't.
Right?
It doesn't.
The second is there is a lack of innovation that's happening because we're so busy building the plane and flying it at the same time. We don't have time to innovate, but we have to innovate because audiences are getting younger.
What people want out of events is different now than it was yesterday.
Absolutely. Like the average attendee age has dropped from 52 to 41 since pre-pandemic to now. And it's going to drop quicker and quicker.
Which is a millennial instead of a Gen Xer, right?
And a Gen Z, right? Like right now it's 57% of the workforce. By 2030, it's going to be 75%, those 2 generations. So expectations are different. These are digital natives, right?
Mm-hmm. But they want to go to events.
They do.
What's really interesting is everyone has this perception that they just sit behind their phones and their computers, but no,
they're the
they
first
want
to
it more
connect.
than ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I've got kids that are Gen Zs, and I've got a whole bunch of Gen Zs that work for me, and their experience is critical.
It is.
And as is trust. We're all talking about trust, right? So this need to innovate is really important. Measurement was another theory, another piece that came up. And one of the findings that we found, even though measurement is the topic of interest for majority, 28% of our members didn't know or didn't have KPIs for their events. That alarms me. That scares me for us as a function.
Mm-hmm. And, I think that if you don't, turn the camera back to yourself and start really analyzing your own, processes, your own team's processes, and then bringing that to your stakeholders, to your decision makers and saying, we need to have clear expectations of what you're getting out of this event. And we're not just doing these events because we've always done these events.
Absolutely. Most dangerous words in the English language, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And so you did the white paper, and it got a lot of great response around the industry.
It did, and we actually released it to the industry because our strategy is super simple. Like at ELX, is based on 4 key pillars. Member value, that's the foundation. If it doesn't deliver value, it doesn't make the cut because all I have is
trust.
you
don't have members.
Right, all I have is their trust because they are busy people. They don't have a lot of time. So member value has to be my foundation that I make every decision through. Member growth, I believe, is critical because every new person brings different perspectives and different insights and opportunities for collaboration.
And to your point, just around, turnover on internal teams, the growth in that, evolving human interaction is really important.
It is. And different industries, different people, different personas, everybody has something different that they bring to the table, and they come with that with the mindset that they're going to participate as well. Partner value, because we don't charge membership fees, so we are funded through our partners. And so if our partners don't get value, then we cease to exist.
Which we appreciate. And I will tell you, as just, very quickly into our partnership, there's been a lot of dialogue around how can we make sure this works for you too. And it's not just, let's, take you and list you somewhere and call it a day.
Put your logo up and put you in a box and never let you out of the box.
Yes,
that's not how
we're having so much fun with where our box is and how big and how many layers to our box is going to have that we haven't even been able to do anything with it because we're like, we could try this or we could try that. And we're so excited about it.
Condo building by the time we're done.
Exactly.
And then industry leadership. I feel very strongly that we all have an obligation to leave this industry better than when we joined it. And so by releasing our research to help the industry, which is what we did with this white paper, if it just helps one person, and that was my theory even with my own personal contact on LinkedIn, if I can help one person, then that's better than helping no one.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what we do here at Event Planner Confessions too. We hope that somebody listening to this finds value and it sparks something that helps them do something that they wouldn't have done without this content.
I love the idea.
Yeah. So we've been having a lot of fun with it. I will say, our audience so far is a really mix of people that are in all different phases of their careers. What would you say to somebody that would love to be an ELX someday? What would be some things that you would recommend to them to do to get, to a place where they would be eligible? eligible to be a part of this organization?
So I think it's building their network. I think my network has helped me get to where I am in my career, right? So that opens doors, being curious, learning, embracing data. I can't stress that enough. Embracing that business of events mindset versus the events business, and really asking up front, what are we trying to achieve with this? Because measurement shouldn't be post-event. Measurement needs to start before you even plan a single thing with the event. Because if you don't know what success looks like, what do you plan
How can you measure it?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's not just about justifying what we've done or the spend that we made. It's about justifying the business impact. So that mindset, I think, is really important. And then, just lean into the industry. I think it's really important for event people to attend events. How do you know what it's like to be an attendee if you're never an attendee at an event, right? So I think that's so important. Get out there, build the network, attend events, learn what works, learn what doesn't, borrow and steal shamelessly. We all do it, right?
Absolutely.
And,
it's flattering when somebody steals something from you, right?
Absolutely.
You want to do that for others too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's great. And I think that for me, I'm most excited when I go into an event at just sort of the people I'm going to interact with along the way. And to your point about networking, I think that is key to success for all of us. But are there any stories or things you can share about people that through ELX have, opened up a new door for their careers, or maybe promotions or other things that have been success moments?
Yeah, there's lots. There's members that have hired other members. There are, we exist and support our members in good times and in bad. And unfortunately, there's been a round of layoffs recently. And so, we've got...
And the Great Resignation, right? Like there's just people
I was
burnt.
part of that with SAP. I totally was part of it.
And I think, we're all seeing that at all different levels and layers, right? People are just wondering what is burnout and have I hit it? And some of the most interesting content that I've been reading about lately is really all geared around burnout. How do we avoid it? How do we understand it? How do we know when we're starting to feel it so we can figure out how to, better use our energy? Because I do think that is something, especially in the events industry, especially post-COVID, we are all, to your point before, we were just running, and we haven't had a chance to take a minute and say, hey, like, what am I running to?
Absolutely. Or from,
right? And, am I ever going to get there at this pace? It's just, what am I going to sacrifice along the way?
And then also to be able to spot it in their teams as well, right? Because
as a leader, it's so important.
Yeah, we're all type A's in this business, really, and we're all very driven by results, and events don't wait, because of burnout. And so we as leaders have to be really mindful of that for our teams as well.
Yeah. And as much as we're in, business events and we are, generally, we're generally weekdays, right? Most of our events, I would say, even on our side, is Sunday night through Thursday afternoon. Every so often there's something on a weekend, but we are lucky enough to sometimes have that sacred time over the weekends to replenish and recharge. But it doesn't feel like anyone expects you to stop on the weekends now. The expectation is that you're connected at all times. And, I can't tell you how many events that we're working on right now where things are just falling to the last minute. And if you don't work on it over the weekend, it's just not going to get done in time for the event. So that burnout feeling is inevitable when you get yourself in those situations. So, how do we get people to be able to add more headcount? How do we get people to be able to, lean on each other more, be less competitive and more, community driven? And all of that, to me, leans on data. Like you have to have something to go to the table and say, look this is the impact it will make. We'll have less turnover. We'll have more, impactful things on our events.
And drive business results, right? At the end of the day,
results,
right?
Exactly.
It's, not just have a party because it's a party. Like there's a business result behind it.
Yeah.
It's important to step back and slow down, I think, even for events. Like even, I was talking about attending events, using that example of like deadlines that, we're always on, we're always working.
Yeah.
Building time into your event for people to be able to even check their emails or take a call is really important as well. Right? Because, I used to use the analogy that an event we would in my past life, I used to say we hold them hostage for 3 days when they're at our event and we want to monopolize every moment of their time.
No.
We can't do that. And people don't want to be held hostage.
And
right?
then they're not going to engage, right? They're going to wait until that keynote starts and then they're going to scroll and catch up
Absolutely,
on the
and not
things they
get any
need
of
to
the
catch on.
messages. Yep.
And then that big, ticket keynote that you spend too much of your budget on probably goes out
Don't
the
get me
window
started.
anyways. Yeah, I know. That's a whole other topic we could drive into is where dollars can make biggest impacts.
Absolutely.
Keynote is not on the top of my list right now either. But,
No, exactly.
But there's so much more we could go to.
Oprah Winfrey is not an audience acquisition problem.
You're absolutely correct.
Or solution, yeah.
You're absolutely correct. But that peer-to-peer moment, that is. So that's what we're investing into. But we are Event Planner Confessions. So I do have to ask, as someone who's been in the incentive travel world for a long time, I imagine you've experienced some crazy moments along the way. Please share with us some confession from your event planning experience.
Oh my gosh, it's hard to narrow this down to one. I think actually I'll start with this one because I was able to bring it full circle this last year within an ELX event.
Okay.
I have avoided outdoor events my entire career since the first incentive travel trip I planned because we were in Palm Springs, one of the places in the world you can actually usually count on the weather, and they got their annual quantity of rain in my week of my program.
Oh my
and
gosh.
everything was meant to be outside. And while it was still beautiful, it was certainly not the impact of a long harvest dinner down the driving range in a ballroom. Like it just wasn't the same thing. So I have literally avoided doing an outdoor event my entire career since.
Wow.
Until this past summer when we did the Annual Congress, which is our flagship event. We do 4 events per year, but this is our biggest one. It's in the summer, and we were in Chicago, and we had dinner on Wrigley Field.
Yes.
And it was incredible.
Yes.
And I was freaking out the entire time because I'm like, what if this gets rained out again?
Literally,
Yeah.
you spent years avoiding this moment.
yeah,
And
and
it
here
must have
I
been
am
going
with-
through your head every call, every planning moment along
With
the way.
125 global heads of events, and it's going to get rained out again. And I mean, that's an audience that's going to get it. But at the same time, like we were
The impact of being on the field is so different to your point
yes,
than it would have been
exactly.
to do an indoor event
In the
of any
weather back
capacity.
out. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, we're here in Florida right now. It is one of the coldest
20-year low of temperature.
Literally, I saw my car was 28 degrees this morning in Florida, mind you. And, we were having conversation about the event that we're a part of this week. And, the indoor, outdoor, should it be indoor, should it be outdoor? And,
Fortunately, we decided indoor.
Exactly. Because even if we sat outdoors, that Florida expectation of an outdoor experience would not have been met at 28 degrees.
Dinner with gloves and a hat would not be fun.
No matter how many space heaters, it just would have changed the experience for sure. Well, I just can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today, sharing with our audience about ELX, but also really about leadership. And, it doesn't have to be lonely, I think is a really important message for everyone to take out of this, but also, burnout's real. Data is important. I mean, there's so many great takeaways from today. Is there any other final words you want to share?
No, other than thank you for having me and thank you for being our partner. I can't wait for you to experience your first event this week. It's going to be incredible. And I think I know you already get it, but you'll get it even more after meeting these people in person. It's going to be fantastic. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicola.